Good day. Welcome to another edition of the Africans in America podcast. With me, as always, is Woriche Uzoka.
Hi, everyone.
Today we want to explore who the African immigrants are and what the stereotypes about African immigrants. It is considered that any African you see is an African immigrant, but the African immigrant community is very wide. Those who know Nigerians and who know Ghanaians and who know that we are very different in many ways will also tell you that South Africans are different and Ghanaians are different, but we all fall under the framework of African immigrants. And there's a lot of stereotype about African immigrants. Many people have their own ideas about African immigrants, and some of these ideas we confront when we engage with normal Americans, other Americans, Latinos, Caucasians, and but among the black diaspora community, we should also recognize that there are also other parts of the black diaspora community that includes Caribbeans and also includes the native African Americans, those ones who have been here for hundreds of years and who are different from African immigrants in their historical journey, in their stories, in their experience of the American reality.
Mhm.
So today
Sure.
that's what we want to discuss. We want to discuss about how people perceive the African immigrants without even knowing that Africa has 55 states, 55 countries, and those 55 countries
Six.
have different Africans. So, Warwick, what is your encounter and experience regarding perceptions of how Africans are?
Okay, so right out the gate, I'll speak from my own experience and my work history and that kind of thing. Um, First of all, they say we're conscientious, right? When we tackle our, you can tell just by maybe the dutiful nature. And I think the presentation, again, it doesn't mean that other blacks or don't present the way we do. But I think that like based on conversations I've had with different people at different times, whenever they encounter me, first of all, they say first they can't hear an accent. Then they say, oh, they started to hear the accent. And then they're like, could tell right away you were African. And so I think that some of the stereotypes are actually derogatory from back in the day. There was the reference that Africans tend to just have a certain look about them. It's quite different now because now everyone dresses the same, everybody eats the same food and all of that. So it's a little different. For us, I think our food is one indicator that we are who we are because we still take our food wherever we go. We take our gari. Sometimes you have to heat up your gari and egusi at work, and it doesn't matter. You know, I've seen some videos on social media where a guy gets into a train and he washes his hands and he's eating his gari, and and it's usually, and all of that. So we tend to carry our culture with us. I think that's one of the significators that we are who we are. We tend to carry our food and our culture and our language. And I think it comes, back to the dutiful nature. It's just inbred, you know. I sometimes tell people here how we were raised as Africans. So the dutiful nature, the fact that you want to be the best at all times, you want to do your best when you're able to, you want to stand out when you're working, when you're presenting. That is one of the significators that you're dealing with an African. And there are no barriers for us, right? When we approach projects, when we approach even applying to colleges here, Africans are very daring. There's no cap. You can't put a cap to them. You can't stop where they're going to go and what they're going to aspire to. I think that comes with our background of always having, like in Nigeria, always having been exposed to a black president. I feel that gives us the confidence. We always think that we can walk into any space and belong there. Now, for the longest time when I lived in America, I couldn't understand the cues, the social cues, right? And so it was a shield for me to a great extent. And so when I walked into spaces, whether or not I was allowed in those spaces, went over my head, didn't matter because I didn't even understand that there were those barriers. Oh, this place is for this group and this is not for this group. It's not a concept that even in my reality today exists. Do I understand racism? Absolutely. But I was shielded for the most part. And so for me as an African, one of those significators is the fact that we can boldly walk into any space and not pick up on the cues as to, oh, whether we're being discriminated against or whether we're even allowed there. It's
Yeah.
not something we can conceptualize really. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned something, and I want to carry on with it.
Sure.
You mentioned the fact that as an African immigrant, one of the first things you don't even know, you're not conscious of it, especially if you come from some parts of Africa. Confidence. Even the confidence is shared differently. If you know other African immigrants, I lived in New York. I lived in New York and I lived for a time in the Bronx. I lived in most all parts of New York, but for once I lived in the Bronx and I got to experience quite a lot of other African immigrants within that circle. This confidence thing, is it common to all African immigrants, or is it just the African immigrants from the west of Africa, and some very loud-mouthed people that like to make a lot of noise? What do you think? But
It depends on what you call confidence. I think that to a great extent, everyone presents, however, to the best of their ability. Showing up, applying yourself, going places, just, going for what it is you want. I think that it features across the board. I don't think, yes, Western Africa, we're louder, we're bolder, but doesn't mean that Southern Africans are not. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean that Eastern Africans are not. Everybody just presents, a certain way. But the confidence of a thing is from the no- I think it's just something that's across the board as Africans. Confidence comes naturally to you because you are who you are and you know your background. And so this confidence of a thing, however we try to analyze it, it's like one of the gifts given to us. Now, it doesn't mean that in every circle you will find people who are loud. Some people are loud and a bit too loud to the point where they're abrasive. Some people are confident, but they're silent. But the fact remains that as much as we really shouldn't generalize about confidence, I think that every African presents confidently in some way, shape, or form. You know, that's my
yeah,
experience. Another experience I've had is like when I go to, like most times it was in academia, when you meet a Black person in your school and you engage with them and realize they are African, right? That was my experience, right? Again, maybe if I had attended an HBCU, it would have been very different, but maybe the schools I attended, that's what I was exposed to is that most Black people I encountered were Africans. And so I think that this confidence of a thing is something that is just innate, right? And I'm sure, other Blacks present confidently too. I have a few African
yeah,
Americans that I worked with, right? And they present very confidently as well. But I think that Africans particularly show up owning the space, if that's okay to
yeah.
say.
Now you mentioned something again about not
Don't
knowing
I
the
always?
cues and not knowing your boundaries, right? You go into an establishment, and because in Nigeria you can talk to your boss and you can go out with your boss and or in Africa we tend to have this group relationship. But here in the office space, especially as African immigrants, we tend to not know where the boundaries are, what to do, especially since they tend to look as if they are friendly,
Mhm.
but they are not necessarily friendly. And the African immigrants I always find are the ones who will not know they don't know boundaries. They don't know where they should be. They don't know their place. And and they just get on as if things are normal, and that thing
Hmm.
tends to put
Hmm.
them in trouble. Because
Yes,
when
yes,
you come
yes.
here, like I said earlier on, that there's a big difference between the reality of the Caribbean diaspora, that the Black Caribbean diaspora, the African American diaspora,
Mm.
African Americans who have a longer history in America here, and the African
Yes.
immigrant. But the African immigrants seem, one of the things that they always fall for is that they don't know their boundaries and they don't know their cue. What do you think about that? You have mentioned it a lot,
I
but
agree.
continue with it.
No, 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 100% I agree with you. I think you can always tell an African who's been here longer than 5 years. You can tell by, their reservations, they're being quiet, they're being whatever, because I think over time you just pick up on the cues. Like I had to pick up on the cues, right? So yes, again, it's just the way it is when you move into a new place. It's part of assimilation. It will take time for that to grow on you, understanding. First of all, especially in a place like America where racism is a thing, has been a
Hello, are you
thing.
there?
I'm here. Can you
Froze
hear
for a
me?
while. Yeah, it froze for a while. Go
Okay.
on.
Can you hear me? I said, especially
Yeah, I
when
can
you
hear you.
come to America, right? Where racism is a thing, right? The assimilation process and understanding how the other blacks who originally reside here behave, it takes time. I had to learn it over time. And I started to understand how things operate really. But yes, Africans show up and they're confident, and they miss the cues because it's not your culture, so you have to learn the culture. It's some of them too need to learn boundaries, especially at the workplace, because a lot of them get into issues. I've seen some of the men get into problems at the workplace because they're overly our culture is one where we're very physical in our culture as Africans. So we give hugs, we hold each other in photos, right? But you come here and you have to learn that everybody is like, first of all, the rules, the law, you can't just, there's something called, taking it too far. So you don't give hugs unless a person reaches out to you and you approve of it, then you give hugs. But because many men have been tagged all kinds of names, sexual assault, etc. at work. So that those are the boundaries that are necessary because it's a whole different culture. It's a whole different
Yeah, it's a
culture.
different
I had to
culture.
learn that.
Yeah.
I had to learn that, or more like teach that, at the refugee ministry, because at the refugee ministry, the refugees that come are from different tribes. Some are Islamic, is a Muslim, some are Christian. So you don't know how to react. You don't even know if to shake their hands. And so most times you have to actually wait. And when they reach out to you, a lot of them will hug you because they're African, and that's again our language, right? Some will even give you a kiss on the cheek here and there. It's how their language, it's how it is, but you have to wait for it. And so with Africans, a lot of them have to go to their workplaces and learn, especially the men. They have to learn the hard way. No, you don't touch your coworker on her arm, and then you don't give her a hug from behind. You don't do stuff like that because, again, it's the culture. So, what you were asking about, the cues, yeah, it goes over their heads a lot, and it's just understandable of assimilation. You will learn. If you're conscious about it, you will learn the culture. And if you don't, for me, it was a shield, like I said. It was a shield because there was some racist undertones sometimes. There were some jokes that were made against me sometimes. And because I didn't even understand what was being said, it went over my head and I didn't even care. And eventually, over the years, when I
Mm.
learned what those things that were being said were, it opened my eyes, but it didn't deter me. It was actually a blessing that I didn't understand in the moment because who knows how my reaction would have been. But yes. So yes, learning those cues are good to an extent, but not all the time. Sometimes it's good. What's that thing they say? Ignorance is bliss. Sometimes it's good to be blissfully
Yeah.
ignorant. Mm.
Okay, now how about the conception about our education? Most times when we come here, this is a very highly skilled environment. People don't sit on on the degrees. The degrees sometimes don't even matter. We come from a culture where degrees and education matter, but here they place a lot of emphasis on certifications. So if a step further, and we find out that most times on the professional level, you are
Mhm.
out of sort as an African immigrant. You really are not equipped by the time you come here, even if you are an accountant in Nigeria, a professional in Nigeria. We are highly educated because the way it is, the vetting process that brings us here, we have to have a visa before we even get here. They
Yes.
pick the most successful among all of us. They don't
Mhm.
pick, we don't come from the southern border like that. So we
Mhm.
don't come, most times it's our management and top management or middle management people who end up here. They are not artisans in any form or in any manner. They are not professionally
Mhm.
skilled in anything unless they were engineers in the one way or the other. And
Mhm.
how do you see, how does this impact the view of Americans on the African immigrant community? I'm talking about the fact that most times the African immigrant community that ends up in America is the educated class, is the middle class in America. It's usually not the artisanal class, it's not the working class, it's actually the middle class that end up in America because it's a rigorous process that they go through to get visa to come here.
Yeah.
But they
And so
also in this
your
environment.
question is, Mhm.
My question is how are you perceived in the professional space? Because most times they
Oh,
end up finding a way to succeed here in that
yes, yes,
professional
yes.
space. From
Mhm.
how do you get on with your colleagues?
Well, I think it's instantaneous. Like you come equipped, you come with your knowledge, your education, and I think it's instantaneous. Like I said, you're qualified. You're actually overqualified when you start your, depending on where you work, when you start your work. The good thing about Africans is they are learners. They are willing learners. And so you see an African who has a law degree from Nigeria come here and start the groundwork to actually be a nurse. And she's ready to learn. She's ready to take whatever certification is necessary. Or you see the ones who want to maybe go into project management. And because we love our titles, you know how they say Niger to like title, right? Let's just be specific to us. Say we
Mhm.
like title. So you always find a Nigerian who you know, comes from Nigeria, even educated, but wants to blend in and still take some more because they want those certifications and those, those abbreviations after their names and all that. And so
Mhm.
how are we perceived is that we're perceived as hard workers. We're perceived as who we are. Actually, I've had co-workers say to me, like, is it not enough going to school? Is it not enough? Don't I have enough? You know what I mean? And I'm like, I haven't even scratched the surface yet, because again, because they're looking at it like it really is not going to, like you said, maybe sometimes it's your skill, your experience that will get you where you need to go. But we don't mind doing the work, especially if it's work we've not done before. Like you want extra degrees or something, you go for it and you do it. So we're seen as hardworking. We always will be seen as hardworking. Um, Socially, I don't know, it all depends on who and their experience back home and what they brought to America with them. Some of them didn't just come from the city. Some of them came from the village. And so assimilating based on maybe America as a place that even opened their eyes, you want to say. So it becomes maybe difficult for them to connect. But that's where you find that thing I talked about where they miss the cues a lot and they just exist blissfully. And you find that some
Mhm.
people in their workplaces get protective over them because they can see the genuineness of their heart and all of that. So they're perceived,
Mhm.
they're usually perceived well over time. Again, when you're hardworking, you make it in America and you're respected for being hardworking. And so over time, your coworkers get protective. They want to work with you. They're happy that you're ready to pick up those extra hours because all those people are always ready, to take on extra work, and then they begin to rely on
Oh,
you. So it's a great yeah, relationship, I think, over time.
yeah,
Yeah.
but let's not forget now, let's broaden our scope to include the
Mhm.
various parts of Africa and the various journeys they use in getting here. We know
Yes.
that Congolese immigrants, to a large extent, are coming to America mainly as refugees, running away from the Congolese wars, which has
Wars. Yes.
been brewing for so many years and has just erupted recently. even the Rwandese, the ones from some other parts of the continent that are in conflict. But you can't say that much also for North Africans. North Africans, the Moroccans, the Egyptians, they are more well-to-do. They end up in the medical class, they end up in the professional class. I think they tend to go through the same kind of problems that West Africans go through also, you know. They
Yeah.
go through this same overly educated people, but they also face the stereotype of being from Muslim countries. They come from Muslim countries. So you can see that the stereotypical experience is different. Congolese seen as refugees, they tend to come as refugees. The Senegalese these days now also have this large refugee stock from them because they come through the southern border. Over 50,000 of them came to the southern border. In that way now, they make the African culture. If you go to New York now, you see a large contingent of Senegalese selling wares on the streets there. So
Yeah.
these all create stereotypes about how people perceive the African immigrant. Then
Yes,
the
yes.
Congolese are in this, they are looking for refugee status in many of these sanctuary states and all that. So
Yes, yes,
even though
yes.
the Nigerian can say this is his own experience, the experience for the Kenyan is different. The experience for
Yes.
this for the Ugandan is
Congolese.
different. The Congolese is different. The one for
Mm-hmm.
the and we should not forget also that there are some other countries in Africa whose experience is even worse because they have to learn like the Congolese
They
need
have
to
to
now
learn
start learning
English.
English. They have to
Yes, yes,
start learning
yes.
English, so they are doubly removed. They're not like us, who are
We have our first language is
from
English.
speaking. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
they have to learn. Some come here learning. They come with it not only a disadvantage in by the means by which they come. They also have this disadvantage in language, and they have to learn all. So we can say
Yes,
the stereotype of the African immigrant is really wide, broad, depending on who you are
it is.
engaging with. You know, we are not
Yes.
one homogeneous. We are not one
Yeah,
homogeneous
we're not
African immigrant
homogenous.
community.
No.
You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
I used to work in I used to live in Brooklyn once and I lived near I lived near a shop managed by some Egyptian managers, and they lived in New Jersey, and it was a totally different experience. In fact, whenever I saw those managers, I saw some form of sadness in their eyes. They looked like people who were bank managers, but they were now managing one retail shop. You know, they were lucky to be managers in a retail shop. But you will see that this man probably was a director in Egypt or also. So it's really broad and really different. Even the Ghanaian experience is totally different from the Nigerian experience.
Definitely.
And we should not forget also that even the
Mm-hmm.
Nigerian experience is different for the different
Mm-hmm.
Nigerian cultures. The
I agree.
Yoruba experience is different from the Igbo experience, and it's different
Mm-hmm.
from the Ijaw experience, and it's different. So you see this whole thing. So it's don't you think is there a way you can say that the African community is homogeneous when you look at all these
Of
disparate
course.
experiences?
Of course, that's what we talk about when we say Africa is not a country, it's a continent. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different orientation. We're different. We have different languages and all of that. And that's why it's necessary that the West learns about Africa in totality, not just bunching us all as one. Because just like you said, the Congolese coming here has a completely different experience as a refugee, right? Having lived in camps, having faced real wars and lived in camps, before they came here. And then the Somalis
The
and people
Somalis,
from Sudan and all that are the ones that have actually gone on the Mediterranean in those boats. They've actually attempted to cross the Mediterranean in those inflatable boats. They've watched. It's not even, it's actually not even amusing that they've watched their family members perish in the water, and then they were only able to survive by some stroke of luck. Maybe there was a log floating in the water. I worked at the refugee ministry. I did a little bit of my internship. I did volunteer work, and I heard these stories. And so, yes, it's a different reality for all parts of Africa. or the different kinds of Africans. And that's why there should be cultural sensitivity. Okay. There has to be cultural sensitivity when you're relating with any type of Black person, anybody who's different from you. Doesn't even only have to be Blacks, it could be Asians, it could be, Native Americans, there has to be cultural sensitivity, understanding that people are going to be different from you no matter what. And you must accommodate them because that is the world we live in. You know what I mean? You have to know that fact that your reality presents this, and that does not mean another man's reality, regardless of how they look, regardless if they share the same skin color as you, does not mean that they're the same as you. And so it becomes necessary to educate the West, to educate all parts of the West about the different faces of Africa, the different faces of even the Caribbean. Everybody's different, Not everybody eats
Yeah.
fufu. Not everybody eats egusi. And not everybody is, you know what I mean?
In
So,
Nigeria, we didn't even mention the large Ethiopian diaspora in America. Yeah,
community, yes,
have their
yes,
own different experience, especially in the fact that they are very. I want to point out something. Now that we're
sure.
talking about the Ethiopians, right?
Yeah.
I lived in Minneapolis at one time. I was in, and um, and in Minneapolis, once I was there, and the president of Ethiopia came. First, I saw the largest Somali community they were Somalis are Muslim.
Lovely.
They tend to be very different in their own way of doing things. And then the president Abiy comes in, and then there was a stadium, a basketball stadium full of Ethiopians. I went there, I saw it. It was amazing. A few
That's
years later,
wonderful.
I came to find out that Oromo is different from Tigray, and Tigray is different from, and there was conflict. And I'm like, no, I saw a lot of them. They were all one people. They are still
Yes.
not. They're like Nigerians. They're like Ghanaians. They are just different, but they are a very important part of the American African
Community,
immigrant community here, especially
community, yeah.
since they seem to be the more successful in having Ethiopian restaurants everywhere, all over
Lovely,
America. They seem
lovely,
to have a way of making their
lovely,
restaurants to be more
lovely.
successful than every other person.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, you know.
Yes, it's just reflective of our nature, who we are. We are diverse people. We have diverse stories. We have diverse orientations. That's why we all look different. The Ethiopians and the Egyptians and the Somalis look different from Western Africa. We have a more, I want to say we have a more like closer to Senegal. I think when you talk of the Bantu tribe, right? And the migration, and eventually the Bantu spread downwards. I think we even look a little like the Southern Africans, right? Again, always remember the looks have come from over time, even the Chinese, the way the Chinese eyes
Yeah.
are and everything over time from environmental factors, right? Environmental factors. And
Yeah.
so when you get to the western part of Africa, right? It's probably one of the hot. The north is hot enough, but when you think of the fact that they're closer to like the Middle East and all of that, and then you see it in their hair, in their looks, right? And then you come to our end, we have more what they call 4C type hair. It's more coily,
Mm.
Coily. It's more
Yeah.
coily and strong.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of environmental factors that make us who we are. And over time, division, and then also colonialism, right? Colonialism, let me use a better pronunciation for it. Colonialism has separated us even further. So the darker you are in Africa, I don't want to say less acceptable, but the more you are under pressure to prove yourself. And so you find that maybe with
Yeah.
the
Okay.
Ethiopians and the Egyptians, right? Things are a lot
Yeah.
different in terms of proving themselves just because there's that whole colonialism that has hung over our heads for centuries. And so it's a different experience for everybody, basically. But I think it goes to say that it goes to demonstrate how diverse we are and how we should all embrace
Yeah.
one another.
Yeah. Thank you, Warwick. Um, at this point, we are coming to the end of the program again. Like last time, I would suggest I will uh, invite comments from the audience. Tell us your own experience, how you have faced the stereotype in America, how you are navigating America as an African immigrant, what you have confronted, what part of Africa you are from, and how your journey has been. The African journey from our discussion today is not homogeneous in any form. It's not homogeneous, no matter the stereotypes. People marry different one. The Ethiopian's journey is different from the Somalis' journey, and it is different from the Sudanese journey, the Congolese, the Senegalese, the Nigerian. The Nigerian journey is even multifaceted. So we have all these different journeys. Thank you for being with us today. We hope that you will spread our message, share our video, comment, be part of our growth, subscribe, subscribe. We have a simple, humble target to reach 50 subscribers before Easter. Subscribe, send comments, and like and share. Thank you very much for being part of this program today. Thank you. Goodbye. Until next time.
Take care. Bye.